Hey everyone, this is Will from Will Code. So today we're going to be looking at how to build a weather app within Expo and React Native. And then we're going to use the Open Weather API in order to make our app. So let's get started. All right, so to get started, we're going to navigate over to the Expo website. I'm just going to click on Get Started. So here, this kind of guides you through of how to set up Expo straight from their website. So if you haven't already, go ahead and download Node.js. This is how we're going to be able to run and use NPM and also Expo and React Native. So let's go ahead and get the Expo CLI by running that in our command. So for here, we would type npm install Expo CLI. Oh, and then we also need a -g here. And this would install it globally. I already have this installed, so I'm not going to install it again and make you guys wait through that. So just go ahead and run that. And then once that is ready, we're going to hit ls. I always like to hit ls, just make sure I'm in the right directory. We're going to do expo init, and then we're going to call our project weather app expo. So here, it gives us several templates to choose from. I always like to go for managed workflow and just use the TypeScript blank configuration. If I was using a more complicated app, then tabs is honestly really good too. But for now, our weather app's going to be pretty basic because we're just getting into it. So let's go ahead and select blank TypeScript, and then we're going to wait for all of the packages to install from NPM. All right, so now that that has been installed, it's going to give us a little notification. It's going to say your project is ready. And then to run your project, it gives you the steps right here. So what we're going to do is do ls, make sure that it's there. Then we're going to change directories into weather app expo ls. And so here you can see all the files that are generated by the expo init. This is basically all of our application right here. So let's do expo start. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up our web browser to whatever port, I guess, Expo decides for you. But here we can run on the Android device emulator on a iOS or web browser even, or you can send the link to email or publish, etc. So what we're going to be doing for this video is running on the Android emulator. However, I would strongly recommend downloading the Expo app on your phone. And then all you have to do is scan this QR code, make sure you're on the same Wi-Fi network, and then you scan the code, and then it'll load it within your actual phone. And I highly recommend doing that just because there's things that emulators can't really mimic, or it's maybe you're used to using, or you have certain settings on your phone that you just like to use. But yeah, I would strongly recommend that using a physical device just because it's real compared to a software emulated one. But however, for the purposes of this video, we're going to be starting up our own emulator. So I'm going to open up Android Studio here. And then let's go to AVD Manager. And here we have some past devices. So we're going to do create virtual device. And then let's do the Pixel 3 sounds pretty good. We're going to use Q. It's just one of the more recent ones. Hit next. Let's call this Weather App Emulator. Okay, and we're going to hit finish. So now our new emulator is here. We can hit run, and this will start it up for us. As we wait for that to boot up. So basically what happens after that boots up is we're just going to hit run on Android device emulator, and that's going to install Expo on this emulator, and then we'll be able to run our app. Okay, so it looks like our emulator has booted up. Just make sure that everything's working good here. I'm going to change a setting on here to be just make sure that it's always on top. I just like doing that so that way I can see the emulator while I'm opening or looking at my code. So here, let's go ahead and hit run on Android device /emulator. This is going to attempt to open it here. And so here we can see in our logs that it's installing Expo on the device. So that means it's going to be installing it on this device right here. Let's wait for it. Okay, so we had a little bit of an error there. So this download's taking longer than expected. So let's try this one more time. It looks like the emulator just crashed right there. So we're just gonna use this one again. Let's hit run. Android emulator is running. Okay, let's minimize this. Hit run on Android device. Attempting to open on the simulator. And here we can see the Expo is opening on the phone. Perfect. Okay, so now that that has loaded inside Expo, it gives us a little info saying this is your first time opening Expo. You can show this menu by clicking Control-M or Command-M on Mac OS. Okay, cool. Perfect. Let's try that real quick just to make sure. Awesome. Okay. So this is the little like toolbar that you would see on the like on your app. So you would swipe up at the bottom, but on this case it's going to be Command-M or Control-M. Just to pop this back up. So this is going to be helpful if our app gets in a weird state or something like that. We can just hit reload without having to shut down the entire emulator. So this says open up app.tsx to start working on your app. So what we're going to do is open up Visual Studio Code or the IDE of your choice, whichever you prefer. Okay, open the folder. Let's go down to okay, perfect. So this is our VS Code. And in here we have our visuals, like, everything that we need. These are all the files that we saw earlier. So we're just going to open up app.tsx. And so this is what is being rendered currently because it is just the app.tsx, and that's like the entry point for the app. So here you can see we have styles that are here, so we could change like the background color if we wanted to. So for now, let's just change this text, and let's say this will be my first weather app. Let's save this. And as you can see on our emulator, refreshed, and says this will be my first weather app. Awesome. So now that we have our code set up and we have our emulator running or on your physical device, whichever you've set up, now we're ready to actually start on the weather app. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is get the permissions from the user to be able to access their location. So let's make an async function, and let's call this get location. And in here, we're going to say async function. Let's call this const status. Oops. Let's destructure that. Equal to location dot request permissions async. That's going to give us an error because we need to await this. And then we're going to say if status is not equal to granted. Let's move that. We're going to call this, let's alert the user and say location permissions denied. App will not work. Okay, let's save that. So we're not calling this get location yet because we need to call it when the component is initially mounted. So to do that, we're going to use this use effect hook. So equals an arrow function. And then in here, we're going to call it get location. And then inside here, we're going to say an empty array for our dependencies. This just means it doesn't depend on anything. So this is only going to run on the first initial render. So inside here, let's call this, we're going to say constant user location is equal to location dot get current position async. And then in here, we need to set that to a state variable. So let's jump up here, say constant location, set location for our setter is going to be use state. And then let's call this undefined for now. Let's call our types to be undefined or a location object. Oops, misspelled that. Location object. Perfect. So now we have the type. So once we have this user location, we can call set location equal to location. Cool. So just to make sure that that is working, let's save it. Cool. So that pops up. This should say, let's say, allow only while using the app. So now we have the location stored inside this location state variable. So let's display that just for our sake, and let's say location coordinates or chords. Let's call this latitude. Boom. Okay, and let's move that one down, and let's call this longitude. Okay, so now when I save this, this will run this get location call. Go up here, we're going to set the location with the location object that we get back. No, it's not. We're going to say user location. That's why we always double check our code. And we need to await this as well. So that's going to call await. Glad that we double checked there. Let's save this. And then boom, we have the user location. So in that, we learned how to do the request permissions async and then get their current position, set it, and then we're displaying it all in one go. So awesome. Now that we know how to do that, we're going to move on to the weather API. Okay, so moving on to the weather API, what we're going to do here is now send the user location to this API. In this, we're going to be using this open weather API, and there's one called, let's minimize this so you guys can see, one call API. You'll have to sign up for an account. It's free for, I don't know how many calls, but more than you'll definitely need for this project. So in this, we have an API key, and this shows us exactly how to call it right here. So let's go ahead and copy this. And in this, let's keep all our use effects kind of together. So we're going to put this one below. We're going to say async function. Let's call this get weather. And this is going to be a call out to that weather API that we were just looking at. So let's say constant weather response is equal to fetch, and then we're going to paste that link. And this should be, let's put this in little, not tildes, but backticks is what I call them. And then let's put a $sign in front of all of our variables that we're going to need. In this case, one's going to be API key, one will be the longitude. We're not going to exclude anything from the call yet. If anything, let's probably do that ourselves just so that we get back the entire data. So in here, we have the lat, we have the long, we have an API key. Let's go ahead and grab our API key. Let's call this one constant. Let's make this in all caps, just so it's very clear that it is a global variable. Save that right there. And then in here we can say API key. And then here we're going to say this is going to be location dot coordinates dot longitude, because that's the one that we're on. And then here we're going to say location dot coordinates dot latitude. So we have this weather response, and this is going to be a fetch call. And this is actually, let's do a response just to show that it's a little more generic. And then in here, we can say our weather response is actually going to be equal to response dot, I believe it's called data. Oop, but I misspelled response. Response dot data. Maybe it's body. Might be body. Oh no. Okay, so let's call this await up here. Thought it would let me at least autocomplete that initially. Response.body. Object is possibly null. I believe that it's just going to be, maybe it might be JSON. Ah, it's JSON. Here we go. So in there, now we'll have our weather response, and then let's do console log. Let's log this weather response, and then let's add that back. Then we're going to do a use effect. And then inside this use effect, we're going to set this to be run on every time the location changes. So we want to call get weather. And then we want to do this every time the location state variable changes. So let's show our emulator. And I misspelled weather response. It's weather response, just so I don't get confused later. And then let's save this. Cool, so that's still rendering. Let's go back to our weather expo, and it looks like we might have gotten an error. We're getting promises back, async. This is supposed to be in await. It's not supposed to be just a regular object. There we go. So now we have our entire weather object coming back. It looks like there's a heat advisory on Friday. So, okay, that's intense. So we obviously, this is a lot of data. We don't need all of this. So let's just get the current weather. So let's reduce this down just a little bit. So now that we know we have the weather response, let's do constant. We're going to say current because we know that that object is on there. We call this weather response because we know that that key is in there. Let's log current instead. Save that. Make sure it refreshes. Let's scroll down. And then in here, we can see that we just have our, I might have saved twice by accident. But here we can see that we just have our current weather rather than that giant object. So the entire object is still coming back, but we're just logging part of it. So inside of get weather, let's call a state variable called current weather, set current weather. Okay, and then we're going to say use state, just like we did before. This can be undefined, or this can be, oh, this is going to be an interesting object. So I don't, or I guess we don't want to make an entire typed object out of that, so we're just going to call this an object type for now, which is capital. And we're just going to say this is undefined for now. Save that. And so when we get our weather, let's go ahead and set it. Set current weather to be current, or yeah, just to be current. Okay, so now this should log, and then inside of here we do set current weather, and then let's go ahead and show the current temperature. So let's look at our response, and in here it has a current temperature of 305. That doesn't seem to be right. So let's look at their API real quick. We're probably missing an optional parameter. Let's go to API doc, scroll down, or maybe up. Let's go up. That would make more sense. Yep, parameters. So it looks like, yes, they do have units. So we're going to use imperial because we're in the US. Feel free to use whatever you need, whichever makes the most sense to you. So let's do and. We're going to call this units. And for now, I'm going to say imperial. So then when I save, this should actually come back with the right stuff. So let's go look at our object again. And then it looks like we have temperature is 89. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. A lot more sense than 305. Cool. So now that we know that's working, let's go ahead and display the current temperature to the user. So inside here we can say current weather, and then we're gonna say this to be current weather dot, let's see, what is it called? Temperature dot temperature. Yep, and then this is possibly undefined, so we're gonna throw in a little question mark right there just to make sure. Let's go ahead and change this to be an any object so it doesn't yell at us the entire time. Save that. And then here, it looks like it's currently not being defined. So let's look at our current stuff, and we have current, oh, it's called temp, not temperature. Let's do temp. And that's the dangers of using any, because it can be any object. And so it's not gonna throw errors for you because it's telling basically TypeScript, I don't know what this object is. But here we do see that we have 89.96, which is awesome. So just from a user standpoint, let's throw in this real quick. We're going to set this to be, oops, not that way. Let's throw in a string. We're just going to say current weather, and boom. And concatenate that on there. Save. Current weather is that. Awesome. So now we're displaying the current weather to the user. Let's go ahead and get rid of all the other stuff that we don't need anymore. Current weather. Awesome. So now that we have the current weather, we can look and see what other resources the open weather map has for us. And I think that I saw one for displaying an icon, so that'll be perfect. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is grab the weather icon for the user. So in there, inside of our object, we have a thing called, inside of our current object, where we have an object called weather. Naming's a little interesting on that one, but this is an array with one element in it, and it looks like there's an icon thing here. So let's look at this and see the return. So inside current, we have weather right here, perfect, and then current weather icon. How to get icons. Okay, so inside here we have an icon list, how to get the icon URL, perfect. So let's copy this link to make it very easy for us. Minimize the emulator real quick. And then we're going to say, let's set weather icon link. And this function currently is not defined yet. So let's say that, brace, this to the end, backtick. Oh, I forgot the backtick in the front. Boom. Okay. So, I think that's right. HTTP, what am I missing here? Oh, because it's a colon. Haha. Okay, let's move this outside, just to make this a little bit easier. Weather link. Set this to be this. Let's go ahead and close this one. Say boom. Set that there. And then inside here, let's say $, right around where the icon is going to be. So inside here, we're going to say current dot weather, I believe is what it's called. Make sure real quick. Current weather, perfect. So we're going to say weather, and then we're going to say 0 for the first element, and then we're going to grab that icon. So in here, we have the link to it, which is the weather link. And then let's make a little state variable. I'm not sure why it's little, but we're going to call this to be the weather link, or weather icon link, and then set weather icon link. And this can be this. We're going to actually type, and this can only be a string, or it can be undefined. So this is initially going to be undefined. Let's go ahead and save this. And the user will also see undefined just on that initial load because the data hasn't loaded. However, we're not worrying about that right this second. So then we're going to say with set weather icon link to be weather link. Save. Boom. So now we need to create the image inside of here for our weather icon. So image, and then we're going to say style is equal to, let's do one more brace, width, if I can do this right, width, let's say 300. And then for the top, let's go ahead and call this image too. For the height, let's call this also 300. Oh, not 3000. Looks like this is an HT. That's not what we want to import. So we want to make sure that we import the React Native image, not an HTML one. Otherwise, that will not work. Let's go ahead and delete this part. It's going to throw us an error because we don't have a source. So as we already declared up top, we're going to say our source is going to be equal to set the URI to be, you guessed it, the weather icon link. So upon saving this, boom, we already have our icon. That was super fast. And that's just awesome. So now that we have the user location, we have the weather to display to the user, and we can change up our styling a little bit later. But for now, I mean, we are displaying the current weather temperature, and then we could throw some units on there as well. And then we have an icon showing them what the weather looks like outside. So that's awesome. So now that we have all the data that we need, let's get into some styling. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get into some styling. So instead of doing just the temperature, let's also throw in a little short degree symbol. And we're going to say Fahrenheit in our case. It may be different for you. Let's go ahead and save that just to show the actual units that we're using. We can take out the current weather. Boom. Okay, so let's make this text just a little bit bigger. Font size. We'll just play around with this. Maybe 50. Cool. Looks good enough to me. So it's 89.89. And then let's make a, let's do the highs and the lows at the bottom. And what we're going to do is create another component for that. So let's go ahead and save this. We're going to open a new file. And this is going to be weather details. Yeah, let's call it weather details.tsx. So inside here, this is going to be just very similar to this. Let's go ahead and import the React stuff. Just make it easier on ourselves. Okay, we're going to say export default function, and this is going to be called weather details. Perfect. So this is going to take in some props that is probably going to, let's do the high and the low for the day. And then we could also do the sunrise and sunset. What's some interesting stuff that the user might want to see? We could even do it like a little hourly thing at the bottom. But let's keep it simple for now. So let's maybe do the high and the low. That sounds pretty good. Hourly forecast. Let's see current. Feels like Hourly, do they have a high maybe? That long time zone. Temp feels like pressure, humidity, weather. Minute, we don't need minute. Hourly, daily. Okay, daily we could do. So in here there is a min, max, which I'm going to assume is the low and the high for the day. So let's make sure daily temp. And then we have morning temperature, day temperature, evening, night, min, daily, max. So this is the low and the high for the day. So here, let's call our minimum daily temperature and then our high. So inside here, let's return two things. One is going to be text, and we're just going to say, let's assume that we're going to be passed in a temperature object. So let's call this temp dot, what should we pass in? Temp dot low, and temp dot high. And so this is going to take in a temperature, or actually this is going to be just called temp. And then this is going to say it has an any type. We can type this, so this would actually be something like type temper or type temp. Let's call it temperature just to be clear. And then this object is actually going to look like, set this equal to here, high, and this will be a number, and then low, which will also be a number. Missed the colon there. Perfect, so that's going to be that. Let's do temperature. So now that we have to pass in something like this. So inside here, let's throw in a view. Oops. View. Perfect. And then let's throw one below. And we're not going to render this right now because we're not displaying this inside of here yet. So what we want to do is build this object that we're going to need, which is that temperature object. So inside here, we have current weather, which is just the current weather, but we're also going to need the high and the low. So let's call this daily temps, set daily temps. And then inside here, we could actually make this equal to the same temperature object, but for now, we're just going to call it an any. So we're going to say undefined or any, and then initially undefined. So inside daily temps, once we get the weather back, let's go ahead and call this one. We're going to say constant. Let's destructure this again, daily to be weather response. Boom, so now we have the daily, and then we're going to set the daily temps. It's going to look like an object. The low is going to be the, I believe it's called daily low. Daily, and this is going to be daily.temp, daily, so we're going to say temp dot min. So we're going to say daily dot temp dot min. And then for our other object, we're going to call this one the high. This is going to be daily dot temp dot high. So cool, we can save that. And that's going to have our daily high and low. Let's go ahead and we can console log that. Looks like we're getting a unhandled promise rejection there. So let's console log this and make sure that we have our correct object saying daily temp. Actually, instead of writing that all out, let's just copy this object. And boom, save. Make sure we're getting the right stuff back. Evaluating daily.temp.min, which is not the actual thing that we're looking for. Okay, so it looks like we missed the key. So instead, let's go with, what does our actual response look like? Console.log weather response. Boom. And this is huge. Okay, cool. So we have our object, we have current, we do have daily, but it's an array. We did not pick up, or I didn't pick up that was an array. So what we're gonna have to do is grab the first one off of here, I believe, unless that is by the date, which it could be. Could very well be. Let's go ahead and check this just to make sure. Daily forecast. It looks like daily.weather. Daily. Looks like that's just returning 1. But it is an array. So let's go ahead and just call the first element there. So this is going to be daily, and then inside here we need to say 0 for that first element within the array. Save that. Make sure that we're getting the right stuff back now. Scroll all the way down with my squeaky mouse. Undefined is not an object. Daily temp.min. That's fine, because we need to log the actual object that we're putting in now too. Save. Cool. Okay. So now this should have our actual object that we're looking for. It looks like high is actually undefined. So we need to make sure that we're grabbing the right daily key off of that. So let's go in. Daily max. Not high. Kept saying high too many times. So let's call this max. I don't know why that formatted so weird. Let's do this again. Cool. Okay, so now we should have inside of here our high and our low. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have that object, we can pass that into the weather details. We can say weather details. Let's auto import that. And then inside here, we're going to say the temperature is going to be equal to our object that we just made, which was the daily temps. Looks like this is not assignable because, yep, okay. So any, we need to change this to be, let's export this type real quick. And then here, let's go ahead and fix this too. Oh, maybe not. Text. A little weird. Okay, save that just to make sure. And so now that we've exported this type temperature, we're going to import that here. Say import temperature from, this is going to be from weather details. Save that. So now that we have that type, we can make the daily temps to be temperature. So now when we pass in temp, we also need to pass in the other props. So let's call this, let's destructure this real quick. So now, as you can see, once we destructured that, we just needed to make sure that we weren't getting all the props. We were saying that temperature was equal to all the props, but we just needed to destructure that. And so now we have this temperature. And so now we have the high, or the low and the high. So inside of here, let's make a little bit of different styling. Let's call this flex1, flex, oop, this needs to be in its own object. Flex1, and then for the flex direction, let's call this row. So we put that in the same row. And this is going to take up a lot of space as well. So let's make this little. There we go. Cool. So now they're really jumbled together. Let's throw in a little margin. And then let's say style. Let's say, text size or font size. I think, what did we do the last one as the title? We said that was equal to 50, so let's say this is 30, just to give a little bit lower of a feel. It's not as important, but it's still kind of important. Let's throw this down here. We're gonna say style, save that. Cool. Okay, so then also let's throw in a little margin. Let's say this is equal to 5, just so that we get a little bit of spacing from the other text and other components. Perfect. So you could probably even bump this up to like 15. There we go. That just looks a little bit better. So now that we have this, we have the low, the high for the day. We also have the current temperature, and then we have the icon just showing just for the user. So let's just make it just a little bit better. Okay, so one thing that I did want to bring up is that we got a little bit lucky with our daily temperatures because we called out to the API and then we didn't display them until we knew we had values. However, on the initial load, it's not going to have it right away. So this is why this is erroring out, and it's showing that the type undefined is not assignable to temperature. So all we need to do here, just for a quick and easy fix, you could also do conditional rendering, which I will probably capture in another video. But for now, we're just going to say high is equal to 0, and then low is, move this down just a little bit, low is also equal to 0. So then when we save, it's either going to pass in daily temps if it's not undefined, and then if it is undefined, it's going to pass in 0 for the low, 0 for the high. So let's let that refresh. Perfect. So then moving to, let's do weather details, just so we can make the styling just a little bit better. So right now we have a margin of 15. Let's go ahead and remove that since we're going to be adding other elements, because we want them to be styled together for now. And then let's put in a feather icon. So the name of this should be arrow down, because this is going to be the icon right after the low temperature. And then size, I believe this is based off of font, so we're going to set it to about the same size. And then color, let's make it blue. It's very common in weather apps. And then let's delete that part, throw in a slash. Perfect, so that's there. Okay, let's copy this, throw this down here, and then we're just going to change this to red. And then this is going to be arrow up. Cool. And then, so now that we have the low temperature, the high temperature, let's just move them apart from each other. So let's grab that text component, say margin left. Let's set it to be like 20, maybe even 40, and kind of far apart. So as you can see, we have the low temperature, we have a blue arrow, we have a red arrow for the high temperature, or the high of the day, and then this is the current temperature, which we're still showing to the user. We still have our icon. And so now what's really nice about this is if we want to change the weather details component, all we have to do is make changes inside of here. We don't have to make them inside of app.tsx, because all we're doing here is saying, hey, you need to render the weather details. And then inside weather details, we can define it however we want it to be. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this app. You can play with the styling, as well as you can also add new elements, such as maybe you could round these numbers to not be decimal points. It would probably look better for the user. You could also add a daily forecast at the bottom, maybe show the percentage of rain for the day, etc. Features that other weather apps may have. But this is definitely just going to get you started, and should be basic enough to expand on for sure. So if you liked the video, that's wonderful, and thank you for watching. Hopefully this tutorial led you through and now you have a successful weather app.